The judge's gavel was a ghost, unheard over the sickening crack of the officer's boot against Dr. Maya Jordan's side. No one knew the brilliant young data scientist was also a decorated special operator. But Langley was calling. The world for Dr. Maya Jordan was a place of elegant, predictable systems. As a data scientist for a leading aerospace contractor, she spent her days modeling the chaotic ballet of orbital mechanics and hypersonic flight paths, finding the hidden logic in the universe's most complex equations. Tonight, the system she navigated was the quiet, rain-slicked asphalt of Charlotte, North Carolina. The hum of her Audi e-tron was a soothing constant as she drove home, her mind still tracing the ghost of a simulation that had finally, after 3 sleepless nights, yielded a breakthrough. It was 2 a.m. The city was asleep. The sudden explosion of red and blue light in her rearview mirror was a system failure. A jarring, illogical intrusion. Maya's heart rate, a metric she subconsciously tracked, remained a steady 65 beats per minute. She checked her speedometer, 7 miles under the limit. She signaled, pulled smoothly to the curb, and killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic swish of the patrol car's wipers. She placed both hands on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions, her fingers still, her gaze fixed forward. It was a practiced, precise protocol, one she'd learned not in driver's ed, but in places where a wrong move was the last move you'd ever make. The officer who approached her window was a large man, his form silhouetted by the strobing lights. His name tag, when he finally leaned into the light of her cabin, read K. Russo. His hand was already resting on the butt of his holstered pistol. "License and registration," he said. The words were a demand, not a request. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, landing directly on her face, forcing her squint. "Good evening, officer," Maya replied, her voice even and calm. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" Officer Russo's jaw tightened. "You have a broken taillight. License and registration." Now, Maya knew, with the certainty of a physicist calculating mass, that her car had no broken taillight. The Audi's diagnostic system would have screamed at her in 3 different languages if a single LED was out of place. But this was not a system based on logic. It was one based on power. "Of course, officer," she said, maintaining the same placid tone. "My license is in my wallet, in my jacket pocket on the passenger seat. My registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to move slowly to retrieve them." She narrated her every move, her hands deliberate and visible. Russo watched her, his eyes narrowed with a suspicion that seemed to be searching for a reason to exist. When she handed him the documents, his flashlight beam lingered on her driver's license. The PhD, printed neatly after her name, seemed to annoy him. "This your car, Jordan?" he asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Yes, sir. It is." He shined his light around the interior, a slow, invasive sweep over the clean leather and the dark, polished console. "Pretty fancy ride for this part of town. What do data scientists do, exactly? Play with computers?" The implication was as clear as the rain on her windshield. The weight of it was familiar, a gravitational pull she'd felt her entire life. "I design and analyze complex systems for aerospace applications, officer." Russo snorted, a sound of pure derision. "Right, and I'm an astronaut." "Step out of the vehicle." Her heart rate ticked up to 70, a negligible variance. Years of training had taught her to control her body's autonomic responses, to treat fear and anger as data points to be observed, not emotions to be acted upon. "With all due respect, I've complied with your requests. Am I being detained?" "That's it," Russo snapped, his composure cracking. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I'm on Beatty's Ford Road. I need backup. Got a suspect refusing to comply." Maya remained silent. Anything she said now would be logged as escalation. She watched in her side mirror as 2 more patrol cars arrived, their lights joining the chaotic light show. Russo conferred with the other officers, his gestures animated and aggressive. While 2 officers began to question neighbors who had been drawn to their windows, Russo returned to her car to conduct a search. It was then that Maya, handcuffed and standing by the rear of her vehicle, saw it. A flicker of movement, a reflection in the rain-streaked window of a nearby storefront. Russo, believing himself unobserved, slipped a small, dark object from his pocket and, with a swift, practiced motion, tucked it deep beneath the passenger seat. Her jaw tightened, a single hard clench of muscle. She didn't speak. She observed. She remembered. She waited for the right moment to act. Well, what we have here? Russo announced a moment later, his voice theatrical. He pulled out a small, amber-colored vial containing a clear liquid. He held it up for the other officers to see. Looks like our doctor has a little something to help her with those complex systems. One of the other officers, a young woman, looked uneasy. Where did you find that? Russo. Under the passenger seat. Clear as day. Then Maya spoke. Her voice was still calm, but now it carried the cold, hard edge of forged steel. That is not mine, officers. And I believe the young man in the third-floor apartment across the street, the one with the drone, has a video recording of Officer Russo planting that evidence. Russo's face contorted in a mask of pure rage. He stepped close, his voice a low, venomous hiss. You shut your mouth. Nobody's going to believe a punk with a toy over me. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in her bicep. You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. As he shoved her into the back of the patrol car, Maya's eyes scanned the apartment building. On a balcony on the third floor, a young man held up his phone and gave a short, sharp nod. His drone, a small, dark shape, hovered silently above, its single red light blinking like a distant, watchful eye. The system had failed, but a new variable had just been introduced into the equation. The ride to the Mecklenburg County Detention Center was a study in systemic friction. The handcuffs were ratcheted too tight. The plastic seat of the patrol car was hard and unyielding, and the silence from the front was thick with a mixture of contempt and procedural boredom. For Maya, however, the physical discomfort was secondary. Her mind was already processing the new reality, running scenarios, calculating probabilities. This was no longer a traffic stop. It was a hostile environment. The objective was no longer to get home. It was to survive, gather intelligence, and identify the optimal path to mission success. She cataloged every detail, the officers' names, the time, the route they took, the casual disregard in their conversation. It was all data. The booking facility was a fluorescent-lit purgatory of concrete and disinfectant. The process was designed to strip away identity, to reduce a person to a set of numbers and charges. Fingerprints, photograph, paperwork. The booking sergeant, a man with tired eyes, barely looked at her as he processed the report filed by Russo. Dr. Data Science. Possession of a Schedule II substance. Resisting arrest. The cognitive dissonance was obvious, but the system wasn't designed to question its own inputs. It only processed them. Upstairs, in a cluttered office that smelled of stale coffee, Captain Frank Miller read Officer Russo's report with a growing sense of unease. A 25-year veteran of a Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department, Miller had a finely tuned instinct for bad paperwork. Russo's report was a masterpiece of a genre. A vague initial cause for the stop, a sudden and unexplained escalation, and the convenient discovery of contraband by an officer with a history. Miller sighed and pulled up Russo's file. 3 prior excessive force complaints, all dismissed. For civilian complaints of racial bias, all deemed unfounded. And, the most telling detail, a note in his file indicating his uncle was a deputy commissioner. Miller felt a familiar headache begin to throb behind his eyes. His desk phone rang. The caller ID showed the extension for the district attorney's office. Miller. Frank, it's Camilo Reyes. The DA's voice was crisp and political. I'm looking at an arrest your boy Russo made tonight. A Dr. Maya Jordan. What's the story? Just reading it myself, Camila. It's got some sharp edges. Well, the police union is already calling, wanting us to throw the book at her. They're saying she was belligerent, a real professional agitator type. And some community activist group is already screaming about a video. Miller's stomach tightened. What video? Who knows? Probably nothing. But my election is in 6 months, Frank. I can't afford a war with the police union, and I can't afford another racial profiling scandal. Make sure your paperwork is bulletproof. I need this to be a clean, by-the-book prosecution." The line went dead. Miller stared at Russo's report. Bulletproof. This thing was full of holes. But the message from the DA's office and from the unwritten code of his own department was clear. Patch the holes. Meanwhile, Maya was led to a holding cell. The steel door clanged shut with a sound of finality. The air was cold, the concrete bench unforgiving. Another woman in the cell was weeping softly in the corner. Maya sat, her back straight, her hands resting on her knees. She closed her eyes. She wasn't in a holding cell in Charlotte. She was in a SEER training exercise. Survive, evade, resist, escape. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate, pushing back the cold tendrils of fear and anger. They were useless emotions, noise in the data stream. She focused on the mission. She had given them a piece of information, the drone. Now she had to wait and see how the system and the people within it would react to that variable. She was alone, in custody, and the institutional machine was grinding against her. But she was not without resources. Her mind was her greatest weapon, and it was a weapon they had no idea she possessed. Leo Martinez was not a punk with a toy. He was a third-year engineering student at UNC Charlotte, and his drone, a DJI Mavic 3 Pro, was a sophisticated piece of equipment he'd saved for a year to buy. He wasn't just flying it for fun. He was testing a custom-built gimbal for a senior project on low-light aerial videography. Officer Russo's illegal stop had provided the perfect, albeit horrifying, test case. The 4K footage stored on his encrypted SSD was crystal clear. Russo's furtive glance, the vial appearing in his hand, the swift, damning motion of planting it in Dr. Jordan's car. The next morning, driven by a potent mix of righteous anger and civic duty, Leo went to the CMPD headquarters. The desk sergeant, a man with a thick mustache and an even thicker air of indifference, regarded him with weary impatience. "I need to submit evidence for an arrest that happened last night," Leo said, his voice earnest. "I have drone footage." The sergeant's eyes barely lifted from his computer screen. "Fill out a witness statement. Someone will contact you in a few weeks." "No, we don't understand." The video shows the officer, Russo, planting the drugs. It proves she's innocent. The sergeant finally looked up, his expression shifting from boredom to annoyance. "Son, we don't accept unsolicited video from civilians. Chain of custody issues. You can write down what you saw. That's the procedure. But the video is the proof." Leo insisted, holding up his phone. "I can show you right now." "That's a serious accusation against an officer," the sergeant said, his tone hardening. "Making a false report is a crime. Now, either fill out the form or leave." Leo stood there, stunned by the bureaucratic wall. They didn't want the truth, they wanted a form. Defeated, but not deterred, he left the station, his mind racing. He went straight to his dorm, uploaded the encrypted video file to a secure cloud server, and sent a password-protected link to the local ACLU chapter and the city's largest news outlet with the subject line, "Video proof. CMPD officer frames innocent woman." Meanwhile, in a small, windowless office at the public defender's building, Ben Carter read the file for his newest client, Dr. Maya Jordan. On paper, it was bizarre. A PhD in data science from MIT, a top-secret security clearance for her work, and now a felony drug charge. He'd seen a share of wrongful arrests, but this one felt different. When they brought Maya into the interview room, he was immediately struck by her composure. There was no fear in her eyes, no frantic desperation. Instead, there was an unnerving stillness, an analytical calm that seemed to be assessing him as much as he was assessing her. "Mr. Carter," she began before he could even introduce himself. "Thank you for coming. I've had approximately 8 hours to analyze my situation. The primary variable is the evidence planted by Officer Russo. The secondary variable is the eyewitness video, which I assume the department is attempting to suppress. The tertiary variable is the systemic bias that predisposes the court to favor an officer's testimony. What is your initial assessment of our strategic options?" Ben stared at her, his prepared speech about her rights and the legal process dying on his lips. He felt like a high school physics student trying to discuss quantum mechanics with a Nobel laureate. Dr. Jordan, he stammered, I'm still reviewing the discovery from the DA. They're claiming you were uncooperative. Uncooperative is a subjective term used to justify escalation when no objective cause exists, she stated, as if explaining a basic principle. I complied with every lawful command. I invoked my right to know the cause for detainment. The system interpreted that as resistance. Ben leaned forward, intrigued. You mentioned a video. Tell me about that. She detailed her observation of the drone with startling precision, describing its approximate altitude, model type, and a likely field of view of its camera. The operator is a young man, likely a student, in the apartment building at the corner of Beatty's Ford and Miranda. He will be our most critical asset. As he listened, Ben realized he wasn't talking to a typical client. He was talking to a strategist. There was a discipline in her, a core of unshakable strength he'd never encountered before. She wasn't just a victim of the system. She was an analyst, deconstructing it piece by piece. Dr. Jordan, Ben said, his own resolve hardening, they're going to try to bury you. They will use your intelligence, your success, your very composure against you. They will paint you as arrogant and defiant. Maya met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something beyond common analysis. It was a cold, hard fire. Let them try, she said. They're operating on a flawed data set. They have no idea who I am. The news of Maya Jordan's arrest didn't travel through official channels. It moved through a network built on shared hardship and unbreakable trust, a ghost net of encrypted texts and quiet phone calls connecting a small, scattered fraternity of warriors. A retired Air Force pararescueman working as a paramedic in Charlotte saw her name on the county arrest log. He recognized it instantly. There is only one Dr. Maya Jordan with that specific, unforgettable combination of intellect and quiet lethality. He made one call. That call was to a man living a quiet life in the Florida Panhandle, a man who now trained service dogs, but had once commanded the 24th Special Tactics Squadron. Colonel Rhett. Marcus Thorne listened to the paramedic's report in silence, his knuckles white around his phone. Maya Jordan, his best and brightest. The one who could outthink, outruck, and outshoot almost anyone on the team. The one they sent in when a mission required not just a warrior, but a scalpel. In custody. Framed. Thorne hung up and immediately dialed a number he hadn't used in 2 years. It connected directly to the office of the commander of Air Force Special Operations Command at Hurlburt Field. This is Thorne, he said, his voice carrying the unmistakable weight of command. I'm calling about Major Jordan. The name acted like a key, unlocking a level of immediate, unquestioning attention. Within 10 minutes, the news was on the desk of the 4-star General Commanding U.S. Special Operations Command, SOCOM, at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa. General Michael Vance was a man who managed a global shadow war from a series of secure video conference rooms. He dealt in threats that the public never knew existed. The news that one of his most decorated and still classified former operators had been taken down by a local cop on a bogus charge was not just an injustice. It was a system failure of an unacceptable magnitude. It was a breach of an unspoken promise that when his people came home, they would be safe. He pulled up Maya's file. The screen filled with lines of blacked out, redacted text, but the accolades shone through. Air Force Cross, Bronze Star with Valor, a list of schools and qualifications that put her in the top 0.1% of all military personnel. Her psychological profiles were even more impressive. Uncanny resilience, superior cognitive function under extreme duress, an almost complete lack of personal vanity. Give me the Attorney General, Vance said to his aide, his voice dangerously calm. The aide, a young major, didn't flinch, but his fingers flew across his keyboard. While that call was being connected, Vance made another one himself, dialing the personal cell of the chief judge for the U.S. District Court for the Western District of North Carolina. Arthur, it's Mike Vance, he said, the pleasantry in his tone barely masking the urgency. I have a situation unfolding in one of your courtrooms in Charlotte. A bail hearing for Dr. Maya Jordan. I need you to listen to me very carefully. This is a matter of national security. Across the country, in Washington, D.C., the Attorney General of the United States was pulled out of a meeting with the Senate Judiciary Committee. He listened to General Vance for 90 seconds, his expression growing more grim with each word. "Understood, General," the AG said. "Consider handled." He hung up and turned to his chief of staff. "Give me the head of the Civil Rights Division and the director of the FBI. Now, and find out everything you can about a police officer in Charlotte named Kevin Russo. A silent, powerful machine, infinitely more vast and complex than the one grinding against Maya in Charlotte, had just been activated. It moved without public notice, through secure channels and direct commands, a leviathan of federal power stirring from slumber. The equation of Maya's situation was about to be fundamentally and irrevocably altered. The Mecklenburg County Courthouse was a monument to institutional gravity, all granite and polished brass, designed to make the individual feel small. On this Tuesday morning, the air inside Courtroom 5B was thick with a mixture of media curiosity and legal routine. The case of the data scientist drug arrest had become a minor local sensation, and a few reporters were scattered amongst the usual crowd of defendants' families. Judge Alastair Monroe presided from his elevated bench, a man whose stern countenance and silver hair seemed as much a part of the courtroom's architecture as the state seal behind him. His reputation was well known. A former prosecutor, tough on crime, and deeply skeptical of any narrative that challenged the authority of law enforcement. When they led Maya in, she was wearing the same clothes from the night of her arrest, now wrinkled and devoid of their professional crispness. Yet, she walked with a straight-back dignity that defied her circumstances. She didn't look like a criminal. She looked like a soldier on inspection. She met her lawyer, Ben Carter, with a brief, almost imperceptible nod. "All rise," the bailiff intoned. The proceedings began. Assistant District Attorney Mar Preston, a young, ambitious lawyer eager to curry favor with the police union, laid out the state's case. "Your Honor," the defendant, Dr. Maya Jordan, was found in possession of a significant quantity of a dangerous synthetic narcotic. During the lawful traffic stop, she was belligerent and uncooperative, forcing Officer Russo to call for backup. Given the seriousness of the charges and her clear defiance of authority, the state believes she is a flight risk. We request bail be set at $100,000. Ben Carter rose, his voice shaking slightly with indignation. "Your Honor, that is preposterous. Dr. Jordan is a respected scientist with no criminal record and deep ties to this community. She is the very definition of not a flight risk. We request she be released on her own recognizance." Judge Monroe peered down at Maya over his reading glasses. "The court will hear from the arresting officer." Officer Kevin Russo took the stand. In his crisp dress uniform, he looked the part of a dedicated public servant. He recounted his version of events, a carefully constructed fiction. He spoke of Maya's erratic driving, her aggressive tone, and the furtive movements that made him fear for his safety. He described her calm demeanor not as discipline, but as a cold, unnatural arrogance. "She looked at me like I was something she was analyzing under a microscope," Russo said, his voice laced with feigned vulnerability. "It was unnerving. When I asked her to step out of the vehicle, she refused. That's when I knew something was wrong." He went on to describe the discovery of the vial, painting it as the climax of a tense and dangerous encounter. "After I found the narcotics, she became verbally abusive, threatening me with her connections. It took 3 of us to get her into the patrol car without anyone getting hurt." From his seat, Ben Carter felt a surge of anger. Russo was a masterful liar, twisting Maya's greatest strengths, her intelligence and composure, into weapons against her. This wasn't a hearing. It was a character assassination. The system wasn't just failing, it was actively collaborating in a lie. And from the bench, Judge Monroe listened, his expression showing nothing but solemn acceptance of the officer's sworn testimony. Ben Carter began his cross-examination, his initial nervousness replaced by a cold, focused anger. He approached the witness stand, his questions precise and methodical. Officer Russo, you testified that you pulled my client over for erratic driving. Yet the citation you filed was for a broken taillight. Which was it? Russo hesitated for a fraction of a second. The erratic driving is what drew my attention to the vehicle. The broken taillight was the specific, citable infraction. I see, but you have no dashcam footage to corroborate this erratic driving, do you? Because your camera was conveniently not activated until after you had already pulled Dr. Jordan over. It's a high-stress job, counselor. Sometimes you forget to hit the button right away. Ben pressed on, chipping away at the foundation of Russo's story. He pointed out the 4-minute gap in Russo's body cam footage, right at the moment he claimed to have discovered the vial. He questioned why, if Maya was so physically resistant, none of the 3 officers on scene had a single scratch on them. With each question, Russo's facade of calm professionalism began to crack. His answers became shorter, his jaw tighter. Judge Monroe finally intervened. Mr. Carter, this is a bail hearing, not a full trial. Do you have a point, or are you just enjoying the sound of your own voice? My point, Your Honor, Ben shot back, is that Officer Russo's testimony is a work of fiction. Before the judge could respond, Ben requested that his client be allowed to speak. Reluctantly, Judge Monroe agreed. Maya rose. She stood perfectly still for a moment, her eyes sweeping across the courtroom, not with fear, but with an air of command. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the room. Your Honor, she began, I am a data scientist. My life's work is to find truth in complex systems by identifying and eliminating erroneous data. The testimony provided by Officer Russo is erroneous data. She then proceeded to dismantle his story with the chilling precision of a machine. Officer Russo claims I was belligerent. My heart rate, as recorded by the biometric sensor on my watch, never exceeded 75 beats per minute during the entire encounter. Belligerence has physiological correlates. They were absent. She continued, her voice never wavering. He claims I made furtive movements. My hands were placed at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel, a protocol designed to maximize visibility and minimize perceived threat. The physics of my position in the driver's seat would make it impossible to reach the area where the vial was discovered without being clearly observed. She looked directly at Russo, who was now visibly sweating. He claims the substance found is a dangerous narcotic. I am a cleared government contractor with access to sensitive national security information. I am subjected to random, comprehensive drug screenings twice a month. The last one was 72 hours ago. The results were, as always, negative. With every logical point, every calmly stated fact, Russo's composure disintegrated. His face flushed a deep, mottled red. His breathing became shallow and rapid. He was a man being cornered not by accusations, but by irrefutable truth. Finally, Maya concluded, turning back to the judge, the entire premise of this arrest is based on a lie perpetrated by an officer who believed his authority placed him above scrutiny. It is a fundamental failure of the system you are sworn to uphold. It was too much. The calm, analytical way she exposed him, the sheer intellectual force of her testimony, broke something inside Kevin Russo. She's lying, he roared, lurching to his feet. Before the bailiffs could react, he crossed the space between the witness stand and the defense table in 2 long strides. He drew back his foot and delivered a vicious, powerful kick to Maya's side, right at her ribs. The sound, a sickening, hollow thud, echoed through the stunned silence of the courtroom. Maya crumpled, not with a scream, but with a sharp, controlled exhalation of breath as her training took over, her body instinctively turning to absorb the blow. Chaos erupted. Bailiffs swarmed Russo, tackling him to the ground as he continued to shout incoherent, rage-filled curses. Ben Carter rushed to Maya's side. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Through it all, Judge Monroe banged his gavel, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Order! Order in this court! When a semblance of calm was restored, Maya was being helped back in her chair by Ben, her face pale, but her expression a mask of incredible self-control. And then, Judge Alistair Monroe, looking down not at the officer being restrained on his courtroom floor, but at the woman who had just been assaulted while in handcuffs, spoke. "Dr. Jordan," he demanded, his voice filled with accusation. "What on earth did you say to provoke him?" The judge's question hung in the air, a monument to broken logic. A wave of incredulous murmurs swept through the gallery. Ben Carter, helping Maya to her feet, turned to the bench in outrage. "Provoke him? Your Honor, my client was just brutally assaulted in your courtroom, while in custody. The only provocation was the truth." But before Judge Monroe could respond, the main courtroom door opened and a bailiff hurried toward the bench, his face etched with an urgency that transcended the immediate chaos. He leaned in and spoke in a low, tense whisper to the judge. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, but the chief judge is on your private line. He says it's a matter of national security, and you are to take the call immediately." National security. The two words acted like a defibrillator on the stunned courtroom. Judge Monroe stared at the bailiff, his face a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "I'm in the middle of," he trailed off, seeing the absolute seriousness in the bailiff's eyes. "Fine," he snapped. "This court is in a 10-minute recess." He banged his gavel and swept from a room toward his chambers, leaving a wake of bewildered silence behind him. In his chambers, Monroe snatched up the secure phone. "This is Monroe. What is so important that—" "Alistair, shut up and listen." The voice on the other end was that of Chief Judge Arthur Vance, and it was colder than Monroe had ever heard it. "I have the Attorney General of the United States on this line. You're to listen to what he has to say. You're not to interrupt, and you are to do exactly as he instructs. Do you understand me?" Monroe sank into his leather chair, the anger draining out of him, replaced by a sudden, cold dread. Yes, I understand." The line clicked. "Judge Monroe, this is Attorney General Robert Prescott." The voice was calm, but carried the weight of the entire Department of Justice. "I'm calling about the defendant in your courtroom, Dr. Maya Jordan. Judge, the woman you have in custody is not just a data scientist. She is Major Maya Jordan, United States Air Force, retired. Her service record is highly classified, but I am authorized by the Secretary of Defense to inform you that she is a recipient of the Air Force Cross, our nation's second highest award for valor in combat." The air left Monroe's lungs. He felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if the floor of his chamber had just fallen away. The Attorney General continued, his voice relentless. "Major Jordan is a national hero whose actions in theaters of operation I cannot name have been critical to the security of this country. The Department of Defense and this office take an extraordinary interest in seeing that she is not subjected to any further injustice. A legal team from the Air Force Judge Advocate General's Corps is en route to your location via military transport. They will be there in 20 minutes. Until they arrive, you will ensure that no further harm comes to Major Jordan, and you will place Officer Kevin Russo in federal custody pending a full civil rights investigation. Is that clear?" "Crystal," Monroe whispered, his voice barely a croak. When Judge Monroe returned to the courtroom, he was a different man. The color had drained from his face, and he moved with the stiff, careful gait of someone in deep shock. He didn't look at Russo, who was now being held by two bailiffs. He didn't look at the prosecutors. He looked only at Maya Jordan, and for the first time, there was something akin to fear in his eyes. "This court is in recess until further notice," he announced, his voice thin. 20 minutes later, the rhythmic thumping of helicopter blades grew from a distant hum to a deafening roar, rattling the tall windows of the courthouse. Outside, in the small park adjacent to the building, a Black UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, bearing no markings but a simple American flag, touched down on the grass. From it emerged a man in the crisp dress uniform of an Air Force colonel, a secured briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. He was met on the ground by two stern-faced men in dark suits, federal agents who had materialized as if from nowhere, and was escorted swiftly into the building. When court was finally recalled, the Air Force colonel was seated at the defense table next to Ben Carter. In his chambers, he had presented Judge Monroe and the district attorney with a single, heavily redacted page from Maya's file. It was enough. The transformation was complete. When Judge Alistair Monroe took the bench again, he looked as though he had aged 10 years in the last hour. He gripped the edges of his podium, his knuckles white. He cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with a gravity that stunned the courtroom into absolute silence. In light of new and frankly extraordinary information that has been presented to this court in camera, he began, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere in the middle distance. These proceedings will now take a different course. He paused, taking a deep breath. Bailiffs, take Officer Kevin Russo into custody. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Russo, who had been smirking confidently just moments before, stared at the judge in disbelief. What? On what charge? You are under arrest, Judge Monroe continued, his voice like the tolling of a bell, for assault, perjury, tampering with evidence, and violation of civil rights under color of law. You will be held without bail pending your arraignment in federal court. As two U.S. Marshals, who had quietly entered the courtroom, stepped forward to handcuff a stunned and sputtering Russo, the judge continued. His gaze finally settled on Maya, and his expression was one of profound, almost fearful, respect. Furthermore, all charges against Dr. Maya Jordan are hereby dismissed, with prejudice. He looked directly at her. Dr. Jordan, on behalf of the entire judicial system of this state, I offer you our most sincere and humble apologies for the ordeal you have been subjected to. The courtroom exploded. Reporters bolted for the doors, shouting into their phones. Russo, being led away in cuffs, was screaming, "You can't do this. Do you know who my uncle is? This is a mistake." Ben Carter turned to Maya, his face a mask of joyous bewilderment. "What in God's name just happened?" he whispered. Maya simply gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Not here." As the marshals removed the handcuffs from Maya's wrists, the Air Force colonel stood, walked over to her, and came to a perfect position of attention. Civilians in the room saw a man in uniform showing respect. But to anyone with military experience, the gesture was unmistakable. It was the deference shown by a senior officer to a recipient of one of the nation's highest honors. "Major Jordan," the colonel said, his voice quiet but clear, deliberately using her rank. "General Vance sends his personal regards. He apologizes for the delay." Maya nodded once, a silent acknowledgement between two people who understood a world that no one else in the room could possibly comprehend. The media swarmed them as they tried to leave, a chaotic scrum of microphones and cameras. "Dr. Jordan, what is your connection to the military? Why did a helicopter land at the courthouse? Are you a secret agent?" They pushed through the crowd, but one reporter from the Associated Press, who had clearly been doing some frantic digging, shouted a question that cut through the noise. "Major Jordan, are you the same Maya Jordan who was awarded the Air Force Cross for actions in Syria 5 years ago?" Maya paused for just a single, fleeting moment. She didn't say a word. She just held the reporter's gaze for a heartbeat before continuing toward the exit. It was all the confirmation the world needed. The story was no longer about a corrupt cop and a wrongful arrest. It was about a hidden hero, and the nation was about to learn her name. The story of Major Maya Jordan did not begin in the sterile clean rooms of an aerospace firm or the hallowed halls of MIT. It began on the cracked pavement of a forgotten neighborhood in West Baltimore, where a young girl with an insatiable curiosity found her escape not on the streets, but in the public library. She devoured books on mathematics and physics, teaching herself calculus from a worn-out textbook because her underfunded high school didn't offer it. Her mind saw the world as a series of interconnected systems, a puzzle waiting to be solved. That singular intellect earned her a full scholarship to Carnegie Mellon for engineering. But it was during her doctoral program at MIT that the puzzle of her own future became unsolvable. Her funding was cut, and the dream she had fought so hard for was about to evaporate. That's when an Air Force recruiter, visiting the campus to find candidates for their research labs, saw something more in the quiet, fiercely intelligent young woman. He saw a different kind of potential. He offered her a deal. The Air Force would pay for her entire PhD, and in return, she would give them 4 years of service as an officer. She accepted, viewing it as a logical transaction. But the Air Force didn't put her in a lab. They saw her aptitude scores, her psychological profiles, her uncanny ability to remain calm under immense pressure. They saw the makings of something far rarer. They offered her a chance to try out for one of the most demanding and secretive jobs in the entire U.S. military, Special Tactics Officer. Special Tactics Officers are the ground commanders for Air Force Special Operations. They are part Green Beret, part air traffic controller, part battlefield genius. They deploy deep behind enemy lines to call in devastating air strikes, rescue downed pilots, and command the complex air-ground battle space. The selection course has an attrition rate of over 90% for men. For a woman to even attempt, it was almost unheard of. The training was designed to break people. Endless days in the freezing surf, grueling land navigation courses with 100-pound packs, psychological torture disguised as resistance training. Maya didn't just survive, she thrived. Where others relied on brute strength, she relied on physics, finding the most efficient way to carry a load or cross a river. Where others were broken by the mental stress, her analytical mind treated it as another system to be understood and overcome. She graduated at the top of her class. Her career was a classified string of deployments to places that didn't appear on the nightly news. She led small teams of elite combat controllers and pararescuemen on missions that shaped global events in unseen ways. She was a ghost, a battlefield commander whose primary weapon was the fleet of A-10s, F-22s, and B-2 bombers she could summon from the sky. The Air Force Cross came from an operation that officially never happened. Her team was tasked with rescuing a group of Doctors Without Borders volunteers taken hostage by an extremist group in the Sahel region of Africa. The mission went sideways. They were ambushed, pinned down, and outnumbered 10-1. Their communications were down, and they were taking heavy casualties. For 6 hours, under constant fire, Maya became the mission's central nervous system. With her primary radio destroyed, she jury-rigged a satellite phone to a laptop, writing code on the fly to broadcast encrypted targeting data to an AC-130 gunship circling miles away. She directed medical aid to the wounded, redistributed ammunition, and coordinated a fighting withdrawal, all while personally returning fire to cover her team's movements. Her actions saved the lives of all 14 surviving hostages and every member of her team. She took 2 bullets to her leg in the final moments of the extraction. Those injuries led to her honorable discharge and medical retirement. The transition to civilian life was another complex system to solve. She took her security clearance, her PhD, and her quiet discipline to the private sector, building a new life out of the public eye. She traded battlefields for boardrooms, a rifle for a keyboard. But she never forgot the core lesson of her former life, that in any system, from a firefight to a traffic stop, the person who maintains discipline and controls the flow of information ultimately wins. She had been a quiet professional, a hero hidden in plain sight, until a corrupt cop in Charlotte, North Carolina, made the mistake of introducing a fatal error into her carefully managed system. The revelation of Dr. Maya Jordan's identity was not a spark, it was a detonation. The story exploded across the national consciousness, a viral supernova of news reports, social media posts, and cable news debates. It was a story that defied easy categorization, a perfect storm of heroism, injustice, race, and systemic corruption. The first shockwave was Leo Martinez's drone footage. Released by the news station he'd sent it to, the high-definition video was damning and irrefutable. It played on a loop on every network. The clear, top-down view of Officer Russo planting the vial, a silent, damning ballet of corruption. The hashtag Justice for Dr. Jordan trended #1 on Twitter for 72 straight hours. The video, shared by celebrities, politicians, and millions of ordinary citizens, was viewed over 50 million times in 2 days. Leo, the quiet engineering student, became an overnight icon of citizen journalism. The second shockwave hit the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Investigative journalists descended on the city, and what they found was a pattern. They uncovered the 7 prior complaints against Russo that had been buried. They exposed his family connection to the deputy commissioner, who was forced into an early retirement within a week. More importantly, other victims of Russo's harassment, emboldened by Maya's story, began to come forward. A black lawyer, a Hispanic doctor, an Indian software engineer, all professionals, all pulled over in expensive cars in nice neighborhoods, all subjected to baseless searches and intimidation by the same officer. The blue wall of silence, which had seemed so impenetrable, began to crumble. Captain Frank Miller, seeing the tide of irrefutable evidence, formally requested a meeting with the FBI agents who had descended on the city. He became a whistleblower, providing internal documents and testimony that detailed the culture of protection that had allowed Russo to operate with impunity. He was soon joined by the young female officer who had been on the scene of Maya's arrest. She provided a sworn statement detailing Russo's long history of racist remarks and his habit of bragging about hunting in affluent neighborhoods. The third shockwave was a wave of peaceful, determined protest. Thousands of Charlotte citizens of all races and backgrounds marched from the police headquarters to the courthouse. They didn't carry signs of anger, but of aspiration. Justice is a system, not a suggestion. Accountability is not anti-police. We stand with Major Jordan. The image of a decorated war hero being assaulted in a courtroom had galvanized the community in a way no abstract debate ever could. The pressure was immense and unrelenting. The police chief, after a disastrous press conference where he tried to frame the incident as an isolated mistake, tendered his resignation. The city's political leadership, facing a full-blown crisis, moved quickly to contain the damage. The mayor announced the formation of a civilian-led commission to conduct a top-to-bottom review of the CMPD's policies on use of force, traffic stops, and internal affairs investigations. The U.S. Department of Justice formally announced a pattern or practice investigation into the department, a sweeping inquiry into systemic civil rights violations. The system, which had moved so monolithically to crush one woman, was now cracking under the weight of its own corruption, exposed to the light by one drone, one hero's quiet dignity, and the collective voice of a community that had finally said, enough. The federal trial of United States versus Kevin Russo was the most watched legal proceeding in North Carolina's recent history. The charges were severe: violation of civil rights, perjury, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. The prosecution, led by a top attorney from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, built their case with methodical, overwhelming force. They presented the drone footage, enhanced by the FBI's forensic lab, which left no doubt about the evidence planting. They played Russo's own body cam video, which contradicted his sworn testimony at every turn. They called his former colleagues to the stand, including Captain Miller, who testified to the systemic pressure to bury complaints against connected officers. Russo's defense was weak and desperate. They tried to paint Maya as an intimidating, somehow threatening figure, a highly trained operator whose calm was a form of psychological aggression. The argument fell apart under cross-examination. "Are you suggesting, counselor," the prosecutor asked, "that a citizen has a responsibility to appear frightened and submissive in order to not be framed by a police officer?" When Maya took the stand, the courtroom was silent. She recounted the events of that night with the same clinical precision she had shown at her bail hearing. She did not speak with anger or emotion, but with the simple, undeniable weight of fact. The defense attorney tried to corner her. "Major Jordan, with your extensive training in combat, surely you could have neutralized Officer Russo if you felt threatened?" Maya's response silenced the room. "My training, counselor, is not about neutralization. It's about de-escalation. It's about control. The goal is to never have to use force. Officer Russo failed in that basic principle. I did not." After a week of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. The verdict was guilty on all counts. But the story's most profound twist came a week later, after the trial was over. Maya had agreed to a single, exclusive interview with a respected national journalist. Near the end of the interview, The journalist asked a final question. You face down terrorists and corrupt systems. What gives you hope? Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she told a story. 7 years ago, she began, I led a team a hostage rescue mission in the Sahel. The target was a compound where a dozen aid workers were being held. The mission was complex, but we were successful. We got all of them out. She paused, her gaze distant. One of the hostages was a young American woman, a volunteer with Doctors Without Borders. She was brave, terrified but brave. Her name was Olivia Monroe. The journalist's eyes widened in sudden, dawning comprehension. Monroe. She's the daughter of Judge Alistair Monroe, Maya confirmed, her voice soft. The judge who presided over my bail hearing. He never knew. The operation is still classified. He had no idea that the woman standing before him in handcuffs was the person who had brought his daughter home. The revelation was stunning. It wasn't just irony. It was a profound statement about the invisible, intricate web that connects all human lives. It was a story about how prejudice can blind us to the humanity of those who may have, in ways we can never know, been our saviors. That's what gives me hope, Maya finished. The knowledge that we are all more connected than we think, and that justice, true justice, is simply the act of seeing that shared humanity, even when it's difficult. 2 weeks later, Judge Raymond Ortiz, a man known for his thoughtful jurisprudence, sentenced Kevin Russo to 15 years in federal prison. In his sentencing statement, he spoke not just to Russo, but to the nation. A police officer's badge is not a shield for prejudice, but a vessel for public trust. When that trust is broken, the wound is not to an individual, but to the very fabric of our society. This sentence is a first step in trying to heal that wound. In the months that followed, the city of Charlotte began a painful but necessary transformation. The DOJ's investigation led to a consent decree, a federally enforced roadmap for reform within the CMPD. The new police chief, a reform-minded woman from outside the department, worked with community leaders, including Maya, to rewrite the rules on everything from traffic stops to use of force. Maya Jordan, with a substantial settlement she received from the city, did not retreat into a quiet life. She founded the Jordan Justice Initiative, a nonprofit foundation dedicated to 2 missions, providing top-tier legal support for victims of police misconduct and using data analytics to identify and reform police departments with patterns of systemic bias. Her first hire was her former lawyer, Ben Carter. Her first major donor was a quiet, anonymous contribution traced back to a charitable fund controlled by the family of Judge Alistair Monroe. The story ends 1 year after the assault, on a bright, sunny afternoon at the graduation ceremony for the newest class of Charlotte-Mecklenburg police cadets. The keynote speaker was Dr. Maya Jordan. She stood at the podium, not in a uniform or a business suit, but in simple, casual clothes. She looked out at the sea of fresh-faced, hopeful recruits. I have lived my life by 2 codes, she told them. The code of the special tactics officer and the code of the scientist. They are more similar than you think. Both demand a rigorous pursuit of truth. Both demand absolute discipline under pressure. And both demand a commitment to a purpose larger than yourself. She spoke of her arrest, not with bitterness, but as a case study in systemic failure. She spoke of the awesome power they were about to be given, and the even greater responsibility that came with it. The badge you are about to receive is not a license to command, she said, her voice ringing with clarity. It is a contract to serve. It is a promise to your community that you will see their humanity before you see anything else. It is a promise to be a guardian, not a warrior. As she finished, the cadets rose to their feet, their applause filling the auditorium. It was not the end of the struggle for justice, not by a long shot, but it was a new beginning. It was the start of a better system, built from the ashes of a broken one. It was a testament to the fact that sometimes the courage of one person, armed with nothing but the truth, can be enough to change the world. What do you believe is the most critical element for reforming a broken system? Whistleblowers, citizen oversight, or a change in leadership? Comment below with your thoughts. This story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about aggression, but about discipline and integrity. If you were moved by Maya Jordan's journey, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter, and share this with someone who needs to see that one person can make a difference. Thank you for watching, and always comment with respect.